Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews, and today I went on a bit of a journey. I just got done watching Flux Gourmet, and here's the journey that I went on. It's a bit of a process, so follow me if you will. I had recently seen and enjoyed The Menu. My channel discusses horror movies, but usually I don't really cover like the AAA titles. So I like to put a lot of emphasis on the indie stuff, the small budget stuff, so on and so forth. The things that might kind of go under the radar. So as much as I enjoy The Menu, I hadn't made a video on it. But then I see Flux Gourmet pop up and I think, hey, it's a chance to kind of cover maybe the same material. It looks like a horror movie surrounding a culinary school. Why not? Let's give it a whirl. And then I see the director, Peter Strickland. And I have not had the best relationship with Peter Strickland's films. I did not enjoy Barbarian Sound Studio. I did not enjoy In Fabric. So my first response was, well, okay, maybe not this one. And then it's like, wait, no. Let's not enter into this with preconceived notions, and let's not shy away from cinematic material that may prove its worth. Just because you didn't like 2 movies from a director doesn't mean you won't like the third. And there's almost the air of, I guess, a soft responsibility in terms of not shying away from a particular filmmaker's subject matter and covering it with an open mind. So I figured, fine, okay, it'll be an exercise in approaching this with that open mind and seeing if I can evaluate this film on a fair level despite having a history. All right, so that's a lot of groundwork covered. Sorry about that. But nevertheless, I did watch Flux Gourmet. And here's the weird thing, among a lot of weird things, is I actually found myself kind of enjoying it more than the previous 2 entries. And that seems to run counterbalance to a lot of folks' opinions. I did look this up after I watched it and after I wrote down my notes. And generally, it seems to be less well received than Barbarian Sound Studio and In Fabric. So I just run against the grain no matter where I go. Okay, so yeah, Flux Gourmet, written and directed by Peter Strickland. And this is a movie that is weird. There's no getting around it. The premise is weird. The performances are weird. Everything about it is weird. And if you've ever seen a Peter Strickland film, this should be the least amount of surprise you'll ever be in your life hearing that. And my assumption of this being set at a culinary school based on, just a few words of a synopsis is not entirely accurate. It's a culinary collective that works with artists and incorporates food into seasonal performance art. And this particular culinary collective seems to be run by Jan Stevens, played by Gwendolyn Christie, who is fantastic as always. And the trio that Jan Stevens has hired on for the season to do this performance art is Billy Rubin, played by Asa Butterfield, Lamina Propria, played by Ariane Labed, and headed by El Del, played by Fatma Mohammed, who is a regular in Peter Strickland's movies. And this particular trio bases their performance art around the concept of sound integrating with meatless food, capturing the noise of boiling pots of sauce, dropping headphone jacks into particular types of food. It's this weird blend between the culinary arts, the performance arts, and the auditory arts. And all of this is being documented by a struggling writer only known as Stones, who is following this troupe and just writing down every interaction, doing interviews, so on and so forth. And his character is the one that we are mostly following along with. He is the eyes into this extraordinary world with which we see things. And if all of this doesn't sound bizarre enough, one of the core principal elements of this is the fact that Stones has a bit of a GI issue. He's full of gas and in a situation where he's in tight living quarters with everybody else. He's in quiet surroundings of performance arts covering with, silent rooms with microphones everywhere. He can't fart. Socially, he can't seem to find an opportunity to fart, and medically, he seems to be suffering from some condition that he's trying to work with a doctor on that is just filling him up. So yes, one of the big core conflicts of this movie is man versus self in somebody's inability to just let go. Peter Strickland film, everybody. So yes, this is just weird through and through. It's weird at every stage. But that, again, should not really be that much of a surprise if you're familiar with this particular writer-director. Even so, I think that I enjoyed this more than the previous two entries, mostly because if I had to put my finger on it, a certain level of expectation going into it. I knew the ride that I was in for. When I watched Barbarian Sound Studio, all I knew was that it was a massive critical smash. Everybody was talking about it, and I just really didn't understand the director's style. Maybe I should go back and reapproach it. I'm certainly willing to do that. In Fabric, I was expecting a little bit more of just a straightforward horror film that happened to be surrounding a haunted dress. And what we wound up getting was a Peter Strickland film first and foremost, and a haunted dress movie after the fact. So this one I went into with completely open eyes. And I think the fact that this one wasn't really so much of a horror movie as it was just kind of a dark comedy, that helped things out. The weird nature of this, I was just simply able to strap myself in and go for the ride with. I wasn't fighting against the tone. The odd elements of the performance arts and the characters' interactions and the dialogue and all of it wasn't really throwing me a curveball anymore. And again, being a little bit of kind of a comedy element, not really massive laughter. I don't think I guffawed even or chuckled once during this movie. It's not really a slapsticky comedy. It's not even really a highbrow comedy. I think it would be a little bit more, comedy of errors, Shakespearean comedy a little bit. It is a little bit of a loose definition of the word, but really what this amounted to was a character-driven drama-esque thing that is just so bizarre in their interactions and their dialogue and what they're fighting with each other about, and this flanger and the farting, and it's just a massive amount of a weird mishmash that is interrupted by even weirder visual cues. I'm struggling at this point. Because I'm definitely not going to be giving this movie a blanket recommendation. This is not a movie for everybody. Certainly. If you're familiar with Peter Strickland's films, then I still struggle to give a recommendation on it, just because it seems like the community consensus is that if you are a fan of Barbarian Sound Studio and In Fabric, you might not like this one. So I don't know where to put this. I want to find an audience for it. I'm really just struggling to do so. And just because I enjoyed it more than two movies that I hated doesn't mean that I just flat out enjoyed it. It was very odd. It was a little difficult. It was a little slow in places, and just I found it more palatable. Let's just say that. I think the best thing that I can really say as far as who should watch this movie, or at the very least who would get the most out of this, is if you have seen a Peter Strickland movie, set your expectations so that it's not quite so much existential dread, terrifying neon color experience, and instead it just follows the pattern a little bit more of a traditional traditional shot kind of film that seems to want to go down a little bit more of a humorous road, be that character interactions, scatological content, sometimes literally. And yeah, it does get a little gross at times. It does challenge things a little bit at times. There's some off-screen animal stuff going on. So, trigger warnings bound here. It's not light fare. But given that, if you are a Peter Strickland fan and you do have a little bit of a reasonable amount of expectations and understanding going into this one, I think that you may enjoy it. Maybe. Yeah, so there we go. Flux Gourmet. It's weird, but maybe that's what you're into. Maybe that's the alley that you want to be walking down today. And if that's the case, I can't recommend it enough. So there you go. That's the best I can do. So thank you very much for joining me on this review. I do hope you enjoyed it. Beyond that, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted. Flangers and farts. That's what this movie was.